Hey there, RemPCs. Welcome to Rules of Cool, where we interview very special guests, creators, gamers, designers, and world builders. I'm your host, Rem Alternus, and today we are going to talk about all things Misspent Youth, the tabletop role-playing game. Unfortunately, the creator of Misspent Youth, Robert Bowl, has a family emergency and will not be able to join us. But I'll be talking with OC Opti Presley, the founder and head unicorn at Fragging Unicorns Games, and Clifton Lambert, the lead writer for Misspent Youth, Fall in Love, Not in Line, now on Kickstarter. And stay tuned because up next at 5 p.m. PST is the series premiere of our one-shot show, where we will play Misspent Youth with some of the game developers and the Rem Alternus team. Shadowrun Emerald Glitch will be back next week. Remember that you can support our wonderful partners at Fragging Unicorns Games by going to their Kickstarter and backing Misspent Youth Issue 3, Fall in Love, Not in Line right now. There are only a few days left, so don't wait. Visit www.remalternus.com/misspent youth to back right now. Now, time to get right into our conversation for this week, so stay tuned, RemPCs. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today to discuss Misspent Youth with Opti, Fragging Unicorns founder and head unicorn, and Clifton, who is the lead writer for Fall in Love, Not in Line, which is issue 3 of Misspent Youth and has 6 days left on Kickstarter. Is that correct?
Correct.
Awesome. So I'd like to hear a little bit about who you are and what your pathway into Misspent Youth has been to your current role. So can we start with Opti?
Sure. Please go over the question again. You want me to tell you how I got to where?
Who are you?
Okay,
how did you get involved in Misspent Youth?
Okay. So I'm Opti. I do a number of podcasts and writing for various RPGs, mostly Shadowrun related stuff. And then I started Fragging Unicorns Games probably 2 years ago, and we had a wildly successful launch of our first game, Gangs of the Undercity, and we have had a pretty good time doing
welcome
that.
to the neighborhood.
As we did that,
there goes our new neighbor.
About a year or two ago, Robert Bowl, the creator of Misspent Youth, which was a huge inspiration for me and some of the game design stuff that I've been looking to put into my games, said he was getting out of the business for not personal reasons. He just didn't like some of the administrative and the hustle and the self-promotion stuff like that, which I totally get because that's what we're doing now. It's gigantically difficult and off-putting sometimes to have to self-promote yourself all the time. But when he posted, hey, I'm getting out of the biz, blah, 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 I was like, yo, I love Misspent Youth and I don't want that to just fade away. If you want help distributing that or, producing it or like carrying it on, like, please let me know. I would love to do that. And he just shot me back an email right back, said like, I would love for Fragging Unicorns to do that. You guys seem like you'd be the perfect fit for this. And then ever since after that, like Robert and I become pretty good friends. And then he's been working with us every step of the way as far as like what comes next for Misspent Youth, new products, like all of our ideas bounce back and forth. So that's how we landed with Misspent Youth. And then I guess I'll let Cliff take over the next part and how we started Fall in Love, Not in Line.
Great. Oh, Cliff, you are muted.
Cliff loves push to talk.
Yes, yeah, the Zoom, you got to have it the window have focus, or it ignores your push to talk, because that's just how it is. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yes, something about me and how I got into this. Gosh, it's a long story with way too many tangents. I'll chop it down to I really love Misspent Youth. Enjoyed seeing it played on tabletop with Will Wheaton. Kind of wish he was still doing that show. I miss it. And we also did a whole campaign of Misspent Youth streamed on the Shadowcasters network, our streaming network, back in the day, and that was a really great experience. We had a great time with that. Did that as a fundraiser as well. Managed to raise some money for charity with that, and it was a lot of fun incorporating that in the game mechanics. More recent years, I've been getting involved in game development writing for tabletop, and Chad's like one of my best friends, or Opti is one of my best friends, and yeah, he's Fragging Unicorns and Misspent Youth, and I think it was Origins this last year that I approached him and said, hey, let's do a Misspent Youth Kickstarter next year, this upcoming year, and I think it would be fun and a pretty easy thing to do and get funded, and I would love to see more Misspent Youth, and the spark struck, and here we are.
Awesome.
And so with that, I've been sort of writing up the new Misspent Youth book for the most part, though I decided I wanted to get more authors involved besides just me writing it. And that's going to be fantastic. We have a great crew of authors who are going to be writing up the different setting ideas and some of the specifics there. But and then I also just sort of get to write rules for this game. It was a little intimidating at first, the imposter syndrome, the idea I'm stepping into Phil Robert Bowles' shoes, and I'm changing stuff and writing some rules that he's written, but he's been really supportive and generous. And I also, I guess I'm kind of good at this because the game's fun.
Yeah, having played about 8 different games of the playtests with you, I would say so.
And Sarah, you probably should get dev credits on this one, because you've so many of your playtest suggestions have actually directly inspired, or have sort of been the push to create some sort of rule or change the rule in some ways. And some of the more significant changes, actually, it's almost like, I think, cutting the episode length from 7 down to 5 scenes. It was almost like you gave me permission to do that, and I was like, yeah, that works. It's not something that would have occurred to me to change something like that, but it's such a great change, I think.
Oh, that's so neat to hear. I don't think I would ever get dev credit for actually writing, because I do not fancy myself a writer at all. So that means a lot. Thank you.
That and the teamwork rule, I think.
Oh, the team. I like the teamwork, even though we can only do it once. But we will get more into those rules after this. I want to get to know you guys a little bit better. So can you tell a story of like how your origin story for getting into gaming overall, not related to Misspent Youth, but way back in the day? How did you become a gamer? Let's start with Opti.
Oh gosh. I don't think I've been asked that question in that way before. So I guess the first time I ever came across any kind of role-playing game was Dungeons and Dragons First Edition, and I was in 3rd grade. And for whatever reason, I don't remember I can't even remember friends I had in high school, but I remember this dude's name. His name was Michael, and he was like this skinny kid with jet black hair. And he's, I was looking for someone to hang out with at recess. And like this dude, I walk around the corner, and this dude, Michael, is like rolling weird looking dice and holding books. And I'm like, what is this tomfoolery? And he explained it to me, and I was like, well, can I play? And he's like, okay. And it was just like, wow, I had such a good time. And then I immediately told my mom, we had this mall out where not necessarily where I lived, but it was like the hugest mall in Southern California called South Coast Plaza. And we were like going there, and I was like, huge bookstore there, like the only one that I knew that had Dungeons and Dragons books, but they had like all of them. And so we would go there, and I'd be like, I want that. And that's why I got the D&D red box. And I took that home and just like devoured everything. And then like the next book I got before even Player's Handbook or Dungeon Master's Guide was the Monster Manual. And like I would take that everywhere. Like imagine like third or fourth grade Opti just carrying Monster Manual everywhere, like in McDonald's, just reading while everybody else is doing whatever. I couldn't be bothered. Like I'm reading Monster Manual, and like that's it. Like, it just took off from there. Within a small time frame, I also got into Shadowrun. I guess I was in sort of junior high by then. But then, yeah, it was just a whirlwind thing. And then high school happened, and it wasn't cool to play D&D or RPGs anymore. So I sort of took a hiatus, but got back into it later.
I'm trying to imagine Opti trying to be cool by not gaming in.
Opti had to do a lot more than stop gaming to be cool in high school, and it never quite worked.
Excellent. Cliff, how about you?
I guess, well, with role-playing games, it's always been a pretty big deal, I think, in my life. I almost feel like I was destined to get into RPGs. You know how you discover something out in the world that you didn't really know existed, but it feels like you knew it was there all along, and it speaks to you and your identity, like your soul, so deeply. It resonates, a moment of resonance. And I can put together a few early memories, like seeing the Jack Chick tracks in my parents' crappy indoctrinating Baptist church that they took me to. That was my first exposure to role-playing games. I think what I got out of it is there are these cool things out there, somehow through the filter of being a child and being indoctrinated in that garbage. Then years later, a friend of mine, his older adult brother, took us swimming somewhere, and he started talking about his role-playing game, his D&D game. He had a castle. He did adventures where he had a wizard, where they like somehow ended up on the Enterprise, and he was shooting things with magic missiles. I don't know what D&D version they were playing, and I honestly didn't understand much of it, but I was like, that clicked with me again, and I wanted to get into it, but of course, satanic panic and all that stuff kind of kept me away. It wasn't till a few years later where I found in a mall bookstore, I want to say it was a Walden Books.
Ooh.
It was a book called, it was a book, just a thin adventure book for the game Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. And Ninja Turtles are not satanic. Everyone knows that, even so-called Christians. Who blame all sorts of things as being satanic. Even they don't think the Ninja Turtles are satanic, or at least not the ones that hung around my parents. So that was sort of my back door into being able to do the thing that I just knew was super important to me. And I didn't even know what the book was or where I was going. It was an adventure book. It had like death traps in the beginning and some adventure descriptions, but there was no character creation. It didn't tell me which books. It was like 2 months later that I actually got the game book and started figuring it out. I was that clueless. But it just ever since that first, like, I guess that Jack Chick track did which again, Jack Chick tracks are garbage and awful and full of hateful things, horrible examples of stuff. But still the magic came through and it hooked me. And it hasn't let me go. And I don't think I would want it to.
Awesome.
With apologies to everybody watching who just loves their chick tracks.
I do not apologize. I mean, you can enjoy them for whatever ironic purpose or whatever, but if you're earnestly handing those out, just stop. Stop. You are not helping the world.
I'm picturing younger Cliff just like going in search of new chick tracks because he wants to like learn what other cool games are out there. Right?
They were all such garbage. I mean, there were comic books you were allowed to read in church though, right? So that was their one thing. And
Cliff ignores the message and just focuses on like what they're telling him not to do. He's like, yes, that's what I'm doing on Saturday.
If only I was that subversive that early. But no, it took me a while to figure out that, my entire indoctrination was a whole bunch of lies designed to, I don't know. Let's go back
to gaming. So I want to go back to Misspent Youth. Speaking of youth, See, it segues, it connects. There we go.
Speaking of subversive and rebellion.
So how did you two discover Misspent Youth? Was it with Shadowcasters Network?
Actually, no. I had been working on a role-playing game called Subversion for a long time. Still working on it. It's our next project after this one. And I had been looking for a mechanic that, how do I say it? That sort of drove home the idea that sometimes by doing the right thing or sticking up for the right things, you lose. Or you can not lose by doing the wrong thing, right? Like in real life, things are a lot less messy than I go fight the kobold and I win. And like, it's like all very straightforward and linear. But in real life, sometimes things don't get better until you suffer or sacrifice. Like and so I was wondering, like, is there anything like that out there? And actually came across, well, the only one that I had come across until that point was Misspent Youth. And so like I found it just by Googling, like, I don't remember what it was, something like, ethical something or other in role-playing games or something, and Misspent Youth came up. So like I ordered it, and I remember getting a personal email from Robert thanking me for ordering the book. And I was like, no problem, dude. Like, and then I watched Will Wheaton play it, and I was like, man, this is cool. And I took it back to my friends who were the Shadowcasters Network at that time, and I said, you guys, we gotta play this. Like, this is some dope stuff. And so I took a lot of that inspiration for the game that we're building, Subversion, and we've been playing Misspent Youth ever since, because it is a game that in the mechanics bakes in the idea that sometimes you're going to lose for doing the right thing, and sometimes your ultimate goal doesn't get achieved unless you are willing to suffer for it. So there's some cool mechanics there that I think lined up with my outlook on the world and how we need to be sort of activating out in it.
Neat. So issue 3, Fall in Love, Not in Line, is now on Kickstarter. But I want to talk a little bit about what is in issue 1 versus issue 2, and then we'll talk some issue 3.
Issue 1 is the sort of first thing. It's not actually it is issue 1, but it's not technically the first Misspent Youth. The first Misspent Youth thing was like a little ash can issue 0, like super zine, feel to it. But what it became was issue 1. And the first Misspent Youth is, well, it's an experience where you and your friends sit together and you create a world, you create characters, you create all of this stuff, and then you inhabit it, and then your youthful offenders take down the authority. So it focuses right up front on you all create the world together, you all create your characters together, you all create like all of this stuff. Every bit of stuff that's in the game will be created by your entire group. And I mean, like, it has all the rules, right? Like, that's the main core rule book, if you want to call it that. But yeah, that's sort of what it is. You all co-create, you all play the game, et cetera, et cetera.
So you build that setting and the characters together. So unlike D&D, where there's a GM that does that by themselves, and like you explore the world around you, you're creating it as a group, so you're aware of it together.
Right.
Okay.
And eventually, like in the most, I think it's version 1.2, there were a couple of settings that were included in the book. If you wanted to sort of hop into them, they weren't very fleshed out, and there was still some work that you needed to do in order to get into character, in order to make the authorities, the setting pop.
To me, the settings included in the first book really felt more like some examples to kind of show you how we do it, rather than here's some things to play through. But you could certainly play them if you wanted to.
Yeah. The expansion, Sell Out With Me, was basically a book of all settings, right? It wasn't any new rules. That's not technically true. But it basically didn't focus on new rules. It focused on creating worlds that you could inhabit that were sort of custom made for Misspent Youth that would be fun to play in, that would sort of explore the breadth of what you could do with the system if you wanted to. But it did have a couple of cool settings. Like one of the ones was for a band, right? If you wanted to play Misspent Youth and have all your characters be band members in like a punk band or something, it has like sort of supplemental rules where you're not taking down an authority, you're like, fighting against a rival band or whatnot. But yeah, essentially that was Robert's attempt to make the Misspent Youth project more diverse. So there was a lot more queer representation in Sell Out With Me. There was a lot more ethnic and racial diversity in Sell Out With Me. And so, yeah, that was what that was intended to do, was to create a bunch of settings to highlight a bunch of people of color and queer artists and storytellers. And then with this one, I'll let Cliff tell you the sort of differences between those two earlier books and what we're doing with Fall in Love, Not in Line.
This book, I guess I wanted to do something different with it. I didn't want to reinvent and just rehash the rules, and I didn't want to do just a setting book, a book with a bunch of settings, though I did want to do that. So we've got is a book that includes multiple settings, not as many as Sell Out With Me, but each one is pretty well fleshed out, or will be when the final parts are written. And that's where we've got the different authors involved. One of them I saw in the chat. Hi, Ava. And but sort of the core part of what makes Fall in Love, Not in Line what it is that it is there to introduce and include people into the game that might not otherwise feel as invited to do so. More specifically, what I'm getting at is the first book is fantastic. The rules are great. I really enjoy them. I love how it dives into the world building, but not everyone likes coming up with the whole world and all of that before they get to start rolling dice and playing the game. A lot of people want to jump into the experience of the narrative RPG. But also, I've noticed playing a lot of games with people who are used to more rules crunchy games like D&D or Shadowrun, going to more narrative games like Misspent Youth and a couple of others that I played. Many of those players find it very difficult to grasp how to play those games and know what to do, because there isn't as much established framework and context in the rules to just like show you what to do. You've got so many different possibilities, and you don't have a skill with a bonus to fall back on. Misspent Youth does provide you with some of those things, but and I think it does really well. I've noticed that even the players who have a harder time getting into things with narrative games, once they get through a scene or two in Misspent Youth, it sparks and they get rolling. They start having a great time being very creative. So my biggest ambition and goal for this project is to take the step from the person who's, hey, what game is this? Can I play? To playing the game as quickly and easily as possible without challenging them to do a bunch of creative work ahead of time. So with that, each go on. I think that's a good ending to that statement.
I feel personally, again, having gotten to play this setting that you wrote a lot, I feel that accomplishes it. On this past Tuesday, actually, I have a home game D&D group, and I was like, why don't we take a break and play this game that I'm facilitating on Kickstarter? And my group is bizarre because we've got experienced gamers, rules lawyers like my husband, and also people that have never played D&D before sitting down with me, so very new gamers. And both sides really seem to enjoy Misspent Youth. I didn't even give them the playtest doc or the character sheets until we got together to play. And I was like, all right, so let's here's character overviews, what sounds cool to you, and they picked based on that. And then I didn't read any of the rules to them. I was just like, here's the setting, scene 1. And I just went through the playtest in that way, and let the playtest doc lead me through. And I didn't even have to communicate with them ahead of time what any of these rules were until it was like, all right, now here's what you do. roll a 2d6, choose a conviction, and so on. So I feel like that really made it accessible to new people, while still being a fun narrative game for those experienced gamers.
Yeah,
My
I had
cents.
the same experience probably a week and a half ago when my little book club that I'm a part of, and it's got, a bunch of church folk in it. It's got a bunch of like anarchist people in it. It's got a bunch of like random people, like, all sorts of religions. But the one thing they had in common is that they'd never played a role-playing game in their life. And so like I was like, hey, I know that this is not sort of what we do normally, but what would you think if we played this game? And because they were all interested in what I did. And so they said, yeah, sure, whatever. And these people who had never played RPGs in their life sat down with me for like 3 or 4 hours and played Misspent Youth, this Fall in Love Not in Line, what we're calling the pilot episodes. And they had a blast. Like they were so into it. Like they came away going like, oh, I really feel like that character. And it was just, they were just so like having a role-playing experience, having never had one before, right? It gets into you, right? It gets under your skin. And this was so easy for them to like just hop in. And I feel like even if the next game we were to play would be like Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, I feel like having this experience and introducing them to a role play and a narrative experience would still make them like better, D&D players, right? Because it introduces you to the role playing side first before the number crunch side. And that part I've always found more fulfilling anyway. So very, very cool experience.
That makes me so happy. That's basically the whole point of what I'm doing. I want to make this easy to bring people into it, whether you're used to the crunchy games or you're totally new to RPGs altogether. And yeah, just like Sarah pointed out, we're just approaching things, just going through it without explaining the rules. Just as you go, it introduces you. That's sort of how the chapters are going to be written, how the playtest document was written. It's really designed to be zero prep. You open it to the chapter for the setting you want to play, and you don't have to know how to play the game or anything. You just maybe take turns passing the book around until you get to the part, make a few decisions, and suddenly you're in a scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that.
I love the idea of sort of low or zero prep RPGs as well. It's something I've toyed around with in other regards. I've written another RPG that I self-published called Funny Freak Out, which is a zero prep sort of a party game style beer and pretzels RPG where you I won't go further into it. It's fun.
Well, what's cool about this one is it's low prep. Literally, you could just step into with the pilot episodes with the way that we have them functioning, right? And you could just have a no prep game, but it's not a no prep game that like will last 30 minutes or an hour. It's a no prep game that you could run for a full 4-hour slot. And if you wanted to continue, you could just keep that same game going still with no prep and feel like, you know what I mean? Like feel like the world is building around you and feel like your characters like have some sort of continuity, right? Like they're going somewhere, yeah.
We played through a campaign on the Rem Alternus channel during the life of the Kickstarter. It's been a lot of fun seeing how it goes with that. And a lot of the playthroughs are one shots, which are great, but I think where Misspent Youth really shines is where you get sort of a limited campaign going. See how the characters evolve from episode to episode. And it was neat seeing how easy it was to write things up, tips for launching into the next episode based on things you've already done or things you have in place. Yeah, so that you can just jump in and play it and run it without having to figure out what you're going to do ahead of time.
Yeah. I think in the future, as I'm asked to fill in for recorded one shots and stuff like that, this is something, Opti, to your point, like prep stresses me out sometimes, and a one shot for D&D never remains a one shot. It ends up being like a 4-shot, and I'm like, what did I commit to? So like knowing that I can get this done in 2 to 4 hours of game, and have a story arc that wraps itself up, that the players help me produce, like that's a super helpful thing for me and something that I think I'll use in the future. So those of you watching, if this sounds up your alley, you can take a minute, open a separate window, and go to www.remalternus.com/misspent-youth. There's 6 days left of the Kickstarter. It is funded, and we are moving toward our first stretch goal. And I'm really excited for the first 2 stretch goals, because at 15,000, 10,000 was our funding goal, and we're at like 13,000 now. 15,000 is a setting chapter written by Robert Bohl, the creator. So he'll still have a fingerprint on this book, which I think is a really cool stretch goal reward. And then I'm really excited too about, and I love hearing you talk about them. The $20,000 stretch goal is another diverse author who's written the only book I recognize that they've written for is Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and I have it on my shelf. I haven't gotten to play it yet, but I'm really excited about it. Can you tell us a little bit about that 20,000 stretch goal author?
Yes, I can. That is Dominic Dickey, who again has written for I'm drawing a blank now, Wizards of the Coast and Thirsty Sword Lesbians and Monte Cook Games. And they are, again, another not that we're like counting, but also we value diversity, but so like another queer person of color on the game. We're already really diverse. I think I posted some numbers earlier about how most of the people writing on this book are not straight white men. Like the straight white men are in the minority in this book, which I really find very gratifying. So the chance to add more people and to celebrate sort of more diverse authors is something that we're super passionate about. Robert was intended, this is a funny story. Robert was actually intended to write a setting in the book already, as was I. And then as we were talking about it, Robert posted something to our chat saying, hey, these are the sort of diversity numbers. Like I crunched an Excel spreadsheet and like, this is what the numbers look like, and we went, oh man, like we're not hitting that goal yet. So Robert and I both backed out of writing settings in the original in this book. And Robert said, like, instead of having diversity as a stretch goal, why don't you have like, the old white guy as a stretch goal, put me there. And then I just dropped out of the project, altogether, and decided that one of our friends, Nathan Blades, is going to replace me. So I'm pretty excited about the way that all turned out. Robert, the white guy, ended up as a stretch goal. And then we decided, you know what, in that process, as I was looking around for, somebody else to fill my spot, Dominic Dickey said, hey, I would like to write for this as well. And I was like, yes, then we'll put you as a stretch goal too. Like, so that's the way that happened. I'm really excited. If we can get to that 20,000, that would be super, super cool. And even if we got to higher than that, that'd be super, super cool. But 20,000 would sort of meet all of my base desires.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit more about the Kickstarter. What are some of the rewards available? Pop quiz, because I designed them.
What are the support tiers? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, what are the different reward tiers that you can pledge at?
At $13, if you are a retailer, you can get the books cheap for $13, but only if you're going to sell them for higher than afterwards. But the first real goal starts at 20, and that is you can get a copy of Misspent Youth, Fall in Love, Not in Line, and you'll also get copies of the first 2 Misspent Youth books as well. So that's a pretty awesome deal, actually.
That's all on PDF.
Yeah, they normally that would be, anyway, that's cheaper than you'd be able to buy them both separately for. And then at $35, you would get the soft cover for Fall in Love, Not in Line, which is the one that we're doing now. And then you would also get PDFs of Fall in Love, Not in Line and the previous 2 books as well. And then
I want to jump in and say,
yeah.
sorry, I'm going to steal a little bit of thunder from this, is that Robert Bohl does have the first book up there for download if you just want to get it free. and he's encouraged people to pirate and torrent and all that stuff. And I fully approve that message. But sell out with me. You can grab with the Kickstarter as well. But I just want people who are interested in the game to just be able to go and grab it right now and check it out, because
the free
really
version,
just a bonus.
The free version is ugly, and it hurts your eyeballs to look at, which is why we call it the eye bleed edition. But yeah, if you just want the rules and want to get into the game, it has all the content from the first Misspent Youth book. It's just not as pretty to look at. But yeah, you can absolutely go get that for free, and again, do it. Share it with your friends. Steal it from us and distribute it illegally.
But
and
for
then
$35, you get a physical copy and you get the 3 books in PDF. So that's 4 total books for $35, which is still pretty nice in the gaming world.
Correct. And then at $70, you will get a full printed set of all 3 books, and we're keeping them all the same, so they look real nice next to each other. You would get the physical copy of Misspent Youth, physical copy of Sell Out with Me, and the physical copy of Fall in Love, Not in Line, and you would also get the PDFs of all of those books as well. So that's a pretty good deal, right? I think so. Then at the $150 level, there are a couple of devs that you can play with, and I think it's all of us here. Opti and Cliff and Rem. I thought Ava was on there.
Sold out.
Yeah,
she's at the 500 level.
You can get yourself at a table with myself or with Rem or with Cliff and play with other people. Or if you want to pledge $500, you can play. You can get a whole table and fill it with 4 of your friends, and you can all play together with one of us. I think actually the only one of those left is Rem. So, but yeah, we might add some more. Who knows? We're getting long in the tooth for this Kickstarter, but who knows? But then I'll also say that there's some add-ons which are close to my heart. And the add-ons that we have are community copies. So we've already said that for every PDF somebody supports, we're gonna give away a PDF. We're gonna hold those as community copies. If you're not familiar with the language of community copies, this is basically when you go to buy something, usually from an independent game company. When you buy them, you have the opportunity to buy community copies, because we realize that gaming sometimes is a hobby that not everybody has access to. Not everybody has access to extra money they can spend on games. So if you feel like it, if you're inclined, you can buy a community copy. And those are just basically copies that are held on the side that when people say, I can't afford this, they can check out for free and they will get those copies. So we're looking to get as many people buying community copies as we can as add-ons, so that we can, the PDFs will give away to those who can't afford them online, and then the physical copies, when people buy community copies as add-ons, we want to take those to schools and to libraries and to other different places, wherever we can get them into, because we feel like this would be a really amazing subversive type literature, subversive type game for people to play in places where that sort of thing are not traditionally welcome. And we've actually this wasn't like a really big selling point for this book, but Cliff and I had the conversation back and forth, like, do we want this one to be as super edgy as the first one? Because the first one was very edgy as far as like language, as far as like content. And we decided, what if we toned it down just a little bit so that we can sort of go in stealth mode, is what we decided to call it.
Okay,
so
but I want to jump in and object a little bit
to
how this is phrased, because we are not really toning it down. We're just not using the keywords that certain adults look at and say, oh, this is definitely not for children because these 4 letters have been collected together and put on this page. So
yes,
there are no F-bombs, but there is absolutely no lack of subversive attitude.
Right.
So
yeah, that's what I wanted to get at. Like, it's not
by stealth mode.
It's not any less subversive for having taken out some of the stuff that's just going to keep it off of the shelves in certain contexts. And that's what we were sort of getting at. Like, we could probably give this to somebody and say like, oh no, it doesn't have any swears in it, right? And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Well,
We'll
then
teach
you
your
read
children to be revolutionaries.
right? And you read it, and you're like, what is this? Like, say, super in your face, and teaches you how to like think for yourself, teaches you how to like stand up, in various situations, teaches you sort of to have an imagination towards rebelling against the things that are wrong in your own world. And you don't need to say 4-letter words to do that. Now, I really like the first Misspent Youth for that reason, where it was unapologetic in its like punch you in the face with like every other word was a swear, and I loved it. I still do. But we thought with this one, we might be able to go into stealth mode and get some revolutionary literature in the hands of people who might not ever be able to get it otherwise.
I'd love to see this game played by, say, middle school aged kids, and it's just not going to happen if we leave the F-bombs in there.
I have
it was a tough decision, because I really feel like it's important to recognize that this sort of nice talk and behavior that's in the surface of things, it's really a system of control and not just actually nice. It's a way to keep people in line and separate us versus them. Like, I had a discussion with my mom. She actually does believe that people who use swear words are less intelligent because of that. And it's not true. I was not able to convince her of the wrongness of that.
Studies have shown otherwise, but yeah, this is one of those times where we just thought it would be cool to be able to get this in the hands of people who wouldn't get other. Oh, I was gonna say, I have a friend on Twitter who was telling me that they're a college professor, right? So the sort of rules about the 4-letter words don't apply as much, but they actually do use Misspent Youth in their classroom to teach about this sort of revolutionary politics. And I was like, holy cow, if we can get that in the hands of some younger kids and some kids who don't otherwise have like access to subversive literature, man, this is going to be a super big win. I'll be super excited to hear those stories if they come out.
Cool. So what else can we expect to see from Misspent Youth and Fragging Unicorns games in the future?
We have a couple of things that are coming down the pike. We have a Misspent Youth game that is horror themed that one of our friends from the Shadowcasters is working on. Oscar Russo is working on a horror themed skin. I'm working on a superhero themed skin of Misspent Youth. And again, I think you could probably expect these to be a little less subversive, right? Because we're just sort of using some of the similar rules. But regardless, the whole standing up and like being able to sell out what's important to you, those sort of things will remain the same.
Cool.
But in a superhero universe, that looks a little bit different than, a bunch of kids, in a high school. So
right.
Those are the two things that we're working on immediately, but also I'd like to open up the license, as it were, so that if anybody wants to create their own setting and characters, or maybe pilot episode for Misspent Youth, we would be able to promote that and share that and point people to buying that, or even host it on our website if that's something that people want to do. So
cool.
We're interested in supporting the community if they wanted to get involved and do their own thing.
Awesome. And what about Fragging Unicorns? You mentioned Subversion.
Yeah, our next role-playing game. So we have a miniatures game called Gangs of the Undercity, and that's a very tactical, in-your-face punk gangs fighting each other as you roll dice. But then we have Misspent Youth, which is narrative RPG. But then there's the other sort of RPG, which is a little bit crunchier, more of a traditional role-playing game experience. And that one is called Subversion. It's set in the same universe as Gangs of the Undercity, but it is essentially a cyberpunk fantasy role-playing game about building up your community and basically going on missions, standing up to the powers that be, and carving out a place for your friends and your family to exist and to thrive using whatever is available to you. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. We're pretty far along in our playtesting. The playtesting that we were doing has been put on hold while we do the Misspent Youth Kickstarter. But yeah, we're pretty pumped about it. We've had a lot of fun running it in the times that we have. So that should be coming. I'm not going to say this year. That would be overly optimistic. But I keep saying I keep saying we're going to kickstart it this year, but I'm not sure if that's true or not.
I thought the Kickstarter date was already picked.
I don't know if it is or not.
Doing like late summer sometime.
See, that just feels, as summer gets closer, that just feels so optimistic.
As the
We
person
don't have to
that's-
have it.
As the person designing your Kickstarters, I have not been notified of that.
Yeah, we did. We wanted to maybe have it so that it overlaps with Gen Con to some extent, but yeah, I don't know. Like we could always pull the trigger, but like I keep
You
wondering.
don't have to have the whole thing done before you kickstart it. We've
That's
got
true.
so much work poured into this thing. It's ready to go. But
Cliff is more
not everyone
optimistic than I
involved
am,
agrees with
ironically.
me. Yeah,
I'm going to start
Yeah,
calling
and
you
then-
Pessy.
Optimistic
Well,
Cliff.
no, honestly, there's another developer on there who's all about like, we've got to make sure we have everything done and perfect before we even consider going to Kickstarter.
We'll
Disagree.
see, folks.
We
It
butt
could be
heads a little
coming.
bit, but we get along fine. But yeah, we
Excellent.
disagree and some points of doing things. I'm a little bit more improvisational. I feel like planning is only going to help you so much because it's important, but it's really not the whole thing.
Fair. So how long does the Kickstarter have left? And what have been some of the highlight moments as we start to wind down our conversation here and get ready to play this game?
Yeah, we have 6 days left. Some of the highlights for me, one of our ads on Facebook, is pointing to Will Wheaton playing this game like I don't know, a couple years ago when Will was still doing the tabletop game. And so we posted that video for one of our ads, and people keep getting excited, like, oh wow, Will Wheaton's doing tabletop again. So like constant stream of like having to go back in and say, no, it's just for our Kickstarter. Sorry to confuse you.
Yeah.
so like as Will Wheaton is having like this really cool renaissance at the moment, people like are seeing our ad with Will Wheaton's face on it and being like, yeah, tabletop, and then being like really disappointed. So being able to crush people's hopes has been a funny thing.
I would hope that not all of them would be disappointed. They'd be like, oh, there's more Misspent Youth. I remember that when they played that in Will Wheaton's tabletop. That's awesome.
Yeah, there
I'm
have
gonna back it right now.
there
Yeah,
have been
definitely.
those, absolutely. But then also we sent some copies of Misspent Youth to Gail Simone, who is a writer for DC Comics, one of the most amazing, best comic book writers that there is in our modern day. And she gave us a glowing review of Misspent Youth. And when we launched the Kickstarter, she was like, hey, I played Misspent Youth and it's awesome. Make sure you support Fragging Unicorns. And so that endorsement, like, I don't know that it drove sales or anything like that, but it meant a lot to me because Gail Simone is one of my most favorite people on the planet. So anytime she posts about us, it makes me super happy. And so that's probably a standout moment for me.
That's awesome.
And then also, I'll just say that having Robert be so overly, not just supportive, but like just kind and helpful and loving through this whole process has been really, really, well, it's just, I think it's helped me and Cliff to feel a lot better about what we're doing, right? I know that Robert didn't have to, let us caretake this. And I know it could be easy for Robert to just let it go and say like, hey, whatever, it's not my deal anymore. But Robert has been so freaking cool through the whole process and just like patting us on the back and like, hey, you guys are doing great. And this is great. And like, oh, how can I be involved? How can I help? I want to help. And it's just been great. The whole thing, it just felt very familial rather than transactional. And I just love that.
That's
Very
sweet.
generous and encouraging, and hope everything is going well for you right now, Robert.
Yeah.
So 6 days left. www.remalternus.com/misspent-youth to go back right now, because there's only 6 days, and if you don't do it now, you're going to forget. So you should go do it now. Um, but stay tuned because we are actually going to say goodbye temporarily to Opti and Clifton as they get ready to go play the game, because we are doing our first episode of the One Shot Show right after this, and we're going to play some Misspent Youth. So you can see everything to do with this game that we've been talking about. So thank you guys both for joining me, and I can't wait to see the game. Up next is the world premiere of the One Shot Show, featuring a playthrough of Misspent Youth. Fragging Unicorns was kind enough to donate a copy of the first 2 issues of Misspent Youth for one lucky winner during the stream. So type in #RemPC in the chat to get your free entry. And you can get additional entries to win by going to our donation page at www.remalternus.com/nuyen or www.patreon.com/remalternus. All donations help us to pay our cast and crew and keep producing content. And our biggest donors can have a message read at the end of the episode by the cast member of their choice. So check it out. And please remember to go check out the Kickstarter for Misspent Youth Fall in Love, Not in Line, an RPG about teen angst, friendship, and rebellion. Stand up to authority and fight injustice with a rules-light, highly narrative and story-focused game, now live on Kickstarter at www.remalternus.com/misspent-youth. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next time, where we'll talk with 2 very special guests about Coddlesworth's Clockwork Circus, a steampunk fantasy comic series, and the accompanying D&D campaign, Like Clockwork. Later, Run PCs.